Hey, everybody. This is Stan Scott with Foggy Bottom Line Media.
And this is Scott Konopasek.
And we're here today with our post election podcast. It's November 5th. It's the morning after the big Tuesday elections yesterday in Virginia, New Jersey, New York, and the Prop 50 contest out in California. And so we want to talk a little bit about the results. Before we do that, though, we want to do a really short technical discussion of the results and what you should be looking for both the night before or the election night and then the day after. So remember, I think I mentioned this in another video. If you're watching the election results at 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock on election night, and it looks like your candidate has won or lost, remember that not all the results are in, and if the results, for example, if the first results reported are all from blue areas, so for example in Virginia that would be Arlington, Fairfax, Richmond, Norfolk. If those have come in first, then it's going to look a lot like the Democrat is ahead and going to win. But if you haven't gotten the rural votes yet, and the votes from red counties like Hanover, which isn't exactly rural anymore, but it's still pretty red, then you could see a comeback. So don't think that looks like some kind of cheating. And then the day after, we're sitting here now looking at the results, trying to figure out how badly your candidate was beaten or how strongly they looked. Remember that this process has not completed yet. Scott, you mentioned in another video that no one's elected on election night. And so there's a canvassing process, and votes can be added or subtracted in the next couple of days. We think we know who won, but it's not certified yet. So that matters, right, Scott?
That's right, absolutely. And probably the most extreme example of votes changing between election night and certification is California, which is why Trump and the Republicans go crazy about California's laws and processes. And the reason is that not all the ballots that are going to be eligible to be counted have been processed and counted, and it takes them days to do that. So in California, they're always adding votes to the mix. Sometimes up to 40% of the total votes cast will be not reported till after election night. But here in Virginia, that the number of votes that gets reported after election day is still very small. It still is largely vote by mails that weren't processed or haven't come in yet, but will be valid when they come in. And it's also a time when audits happen, and if there's any mistakes, or a lot of the results here in Virginia, as we've previously talked about, are manually keyed in. They'll go back and be checking those numbers and making any corrections as they need to. And apparently, in my contest last night, there's something going on right now. I don't know exactly what, but I know that they're working through the canvassing and proofing process. But when I got up this morning and checked the numbers, my percentage was 45%. But since then, it's dropped down to 43%. And the number of votes, raw votes that were reported for me dropped about 2,500. Which indicates to me that somewhere in one of the three counties they found a mistake. Something was entered twice, and they're going through and correcting it. So I can see now that I'm on the candidate side. I can see how if I didn't understand what was going on and understand the process, how that would make me light my hair on fire. And you can tell in the past I've done that, and this is what happens when you do. So, this is just part of
Looks like I've had some hair on fire moments too.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So what's interesting to me is I'm on this side of the equation now, instead of being the guy who is having the votes corrected or moved in and out, and knowing what's going on. I'm on the outside trying to keep an eye on things and figure out what's going on.
And it's one thing if that sudden change, that overnight change, moves you from a 56 to
Well, yeah, winner to a
43
loser.
defeat.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if it turns you, if you thought you had won last night, and you get up and you find suddenly 2,500 votes vanished into thin air, then you might be lighting something else on fire, not just your hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's
That would.
the kind of thing that can happen because we're human beings. We make mistakes, and that's why these election officials, and Scott, really appreciate you bringing your expertise on this to the table here. That's why these election officials work very, very diligently to make sure everything is correct. It's double, triple, quadruple checked, counted over and over again. Some ballots that were cast were provisional, and they'll end up being taken out. Some that were cast and counted may, for one reason or another, be pulled out. Maybe someone voted twice accidentally, something like that.
Yeah.
That
So
would be a very
I
small number, like you
actually,
said.
yeah,
Go ahead.
to keep things really factual, uh, ballots are never taken out. Provisional ballots have not been counted yet. So those
Oh,
ballots
okay.
will
Okay.
be adjudicated and added in if they're eligible.
Okay.
So they
All right.
don't take votes out because they have no idea which ballot belongs to which voter or what fact circumstances there are. So those decisions have to be made before they get counted. Uh,
Oh,
but data entry errors, keying errors, things like that, those are, or just uploading electronic media twice. Those are some
right.
of the kind of things that happen where you might want to back out some of the votes afterwards. But it's not the individual vote. So I just want to make sure that our viewers and
Yeah.
listeners
My bad.
understand that they're
My
not
bad.
going in and pulling ballots out of the count.
That's, that's why I need to make sure I let you answer those kinds of questions and not me, since you're the expert on this stuff. So let's sort of switch over to results, and except for Scott's race, which is maybe the one piece of bad news, albeit maybe expected news from last night. Buddy Fowler did manage to win, not unexpected. Scott, I think you did move the needle a little bit, whether that's 43 or 45. That's a little bit better. So that's helpful. And, there's a lot of reasons why that might happen. It could be the campaign strategy. It could be demographic changes. It could be, who decided to get motivated and who decided to stay home. But in any event, it looks like the 59th district is still a pretty solidly red district. The Commonwealth of Virginia, however, not so much. And this was a clean sweep. And honestly, quite even to me, I was very optimistic that Democrats would do well, this was almost a shocking result. Not just the 14-point so far win for Spanberger as governor, but also that Jones won by 5 to 6 points after the text
Right.
debacle, which was a little unexpected. But even crazier, the Democrats flipped 13 seats in the House of Delegates. Yikes. If you're a Republican, you have to be
Right.
really worried and wondering what happened there. What do you think that's about, Scott?
Well, I think there's a national sentiment that's anti-federal government or anti-Trump that's been provoked by the shutdowns, that's been provoked by Doge, been provoked by the tariffs, and just been provoked by the tone and lack of respect and ICE detentions and arrests going on. And I think just a lot of normal people are just saying, hey, if the only thing I can do is vote Democrat to say that I don't like what's going on, that's what I'm going to do. So as I've been
Right.
talking with voters, uh, I that's what I've been hearing, and that's what I really expected to have happen. I was just a little bit more hopeful that more of those voters would have lived in the 59th district, uh,
Right.
but
Right.
no, but um, yeah, and I think that same phenomenon is what we're seeing in California with the passage of Prop 50. It was the
Right.
campaign there was directly against Trump, uh, and I think Mondami up in New York City is a foil for for Trump and the Republicans. So as a result, uh, people voted for him, and I think New Jersey is basically the same story as here in Virginia and in New York.
Well, I was reading some stuff this morning on the New Jersey race, and one interesting thing, I'm not sure how he says his name, Cacciatelli, or I can't remember the
Uh,
Republican candidate. The Republican that he came very close to winning 4 years ago when he ran
right.
as more of a centrist Republican and didn't appear to be buying into the MAGA sort of agenda as much. This time he went all MAGA and he got hammered by what someone called a wine box mom, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, which I think is an interesting political term, wine box mom. And you've heard me say before, some of you have heard me say before that, people who there's really two kinds of people who run in local elections. It's the developers who want control of the planning process, and the moms that are upset about the schools for some reason. And she came across to me as a mom who was upset about schools and general daily life, the cost of living, those kinds of things. And I guess you could sort of accuse Spamberger of the same kind of vibe, right?
yeah. Except the mom in New Jersey was a Navy chopper pilot for many years.
Well, I'm not sure Weinbach's
So
mom
not
fits that. Well,
yeah, so
but
not
Spamberger
exactly your
was
typical. Yeah, was
well,
agency
so
was
not your
involved in national defense as well. Yeah,
yeah. So you have two women who were either military or CIA, so definitely both national security types. But I just thought that was interesting about the race in New Jersey. How the again it sort of seems to validate what you just said about a lot of the results from yesterday being sort of a rebuke to Donald Trump and the MAGA agenda. He did that shift toward MAGA, and his numbers went way down, which I thought was very interesting. And then but I want to ask you what you think about the Mamdani thing, because you look at that race in New York. Now, everyone, don't get me wrong, New York is a very special sort of political animal when it comes to the voter base, the lifestyles, who lives there, right? And you really have a very broad range from super, super wealthy people, celebrities, movie stars, all the way down to the guy who has to drive 2 hours every night to work in a restaurant because he can't afford a downtown apartment close to the bar he works in, right? So, but
yeah.
Mamdani ran on a specifically. I mean, there's a couple of things about him that are interesting that I want to ask you about, Scott. And the one of them is that he's Muslim, right? Which created a line of it. One of the lines of attack against him was anti-Semitism, sort of assuming that if you're Muslim, you must also hate Jewish people, right? Now, I think Mamdani is anti-Zionism, which is very different from Judaism. But the second one is that he is an open I am a social democrat, sort of democratic socialist, right?
Right.
And so this is the first time someone has run as a no kidding, open, I am a democratic socialist and won big against what now he ran against Cuomo, who is a centrist Democrat, though he wasn't running as a Democrat this time. And the Republican was way down in third place. So my question that I'd like to ask you folks for comments on, and for you, Scott, does this say anything about where the Democratic Party should be moving, especially in view of the fact that two relative moderates won in New Jersey and Virginia?
Yeah. So as I look at the New York City situation, and I have a son who lives there, who lives in Brooklyn, and they really have different issues and challenges that they need local government, city government to manage. Much different than what we have here. So the guy that you talked about having to drive for 2 hours to get to his
Mm-hmm.
job, they don't drive for 2 hours. They might spend 2 hours taking a bus and then the subway, and then
Oh, right. Yeah.
another bus.
Yeah.
Yeah, they rely on mass transportation because it's impossible to get around in a car for the average person, and there's no place to park one.
Right.
And rent is
Yeah.
really kind of out of control. They sublet rooms, and somebody will rent an apartment, and they'll sublet a room in the apartment to someone else. So housing is really, it's hard to find, and it's very expensive, and it's a totally different housing model than what we have here. So I think what's unique about Mamdani is he's offering solutions to the specific problems and beefs that New Yorkers have. His whole thing about grocery stores is because there's not enough grocery stores. There are food deserts
Right.
in New York City, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So that's his solution to that problem. Free buses,
Right.
faster buses. That's his solution uh, to the transportation issues that everyone wrestles with, rich or poor. And rent controls. That's an effort and an acknowledgement to say we have a problem here, an issue here, and this is how I think I can solve it. Now, will he be able to implement those specific solutions to those problems? That's an open question. He's going to have to prove that he can. But I think, coming back to your question, I think what got people to vote for him was that he clearly articulated problem, solution.
Right.
And Democrats don't do that. Cuomo wasn't doing that. Uh, the I would say that the governors in both Virginia and New Jersey were articulating more what the problems were that the people were feeling and proposing solutions, not as specific and as granular as
Right.
Mamdani, and certainly not as dramatic. But I think Cuomo, representing old school Democrats, uh, failed to articulate what the problems were, have any empathy for people having those problems, and failing to provide any specific solutions other than, oh, just trust me, yeah, we'll make it work. And
Right.
I think
Right.
that that's the appeal. I'm not sure it's a far left veer for the Democratic Party. I think it's the pragmatism that Mamdani is showing, and that Spanberger and Cheryl have shown, that have made them winners in this election cycle. So, looking into the future and advising Democrats generally, my recommendation is be very specific about what the problems are that the people are feeling, not what you think the problems are, but what the people think the problems are, and provide specific, offer specific ideas for how to solve those problems, rather than the same old, or we always do this, or just trust me, we'll figure it out.
Right. So Mamdani specifically specified the problem that these folks have to take public transportation to get to their jobs, and that's an expense, right? And his solution, his specific solution, was free buses, right, and free
Well, and
subway
also it
for
was
these
slow, and
folks.
his other promise was to make it faster.
Yeah. So this specific problem, specific solution, and Spanberger used the word pragmatism in her, victory speech last night. But
Right.
I do see her as a very pragmatic type of politician and public official, but she wasn't as specific. It was, we're going to protect abortion, but we're not going to say how exactly. We're going to cut the costs for housing. Now, she did say in the victory speech, I got the sense that her team will want to look at housing costs in Virginia and try to find some specific solutions. But I can't really say I got the vibe that they already have something in mind that they could articulate, at least not in that speech,
No,
right?
but she did talk about energy costs and reining in the power
Mm-hmm.
companies and making the high consumers pay their fair share. So and
Yeah.
that's a pain point issue that I've learned that our voters are feeling right now. The
Right.
increase uh, of electricity charges, and she did promise Virginia based power generation. And she didn't get into any detail, but I'm sure that's the revival of wind and solar initiatives that have kind of been iced right now by the Trump administration. So yeah, not as specific as Mondami, and maybe the problems are not quite as universally recognized as problems here in Virginia as they are in New York City. But she was showing that pragmatic bent in terms of saying here's a Virginia problem, and we're going to tackle it. We're going to solve it. Yeah, she didn't get too much into
Right.
the details.
Right. And for those of you, when we talk about electricity users paying their fair share, what Scott's referring to there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, but I think what you're referring to there is the idea that right under the pricing model right now, Dominion Power, if you're a heavy user of electricity, like a large business, let's say a Walmart supercenter is going to use a lot of electricity. They use a model that's kind of if you buy five get one free at the grocery store. If you buy more
Right.
electricity, you get a lower price. What this incentivizes is for these organizations to they don't have to worry about conservation and being careful with it, right? So the expense of buying more energy efficient light bulbs and replacing them, to them it makes no difference. And this is going to be especially bad when these data centers start coming online, or more of them, because these things are monumental users of electricity. And this is a case where the law of supply and demand will kick in quickly if these data centers start eating electricity at levels that Dominion can't right now provide without more sort of capacity. Then prices are going to go up. And that means my electricity bill is going to go up, yours is going to go up. And I think that's what Spanberger was talking about, was basically telling Dominion, you can't use that buy more, get it cheaper pricing model. You got to charge everybody the same amount for a kilowatt hour and make these guys conserve a little more. Is that what you're thinking too, Scott?
Yeah, I'm not sure she would say that pricing has to be flat and everybody has to pay the same rate, but the high users definitely shouldn't be getting the discounts that they are. But you mentioned data centers. Data centers really change the equation here because in order to supply data centers with the energy that they need, the energy companies have to invest in the grid and more infrastructure to be able to transport and deliver that power and electricity, and those are costs. And those are costs
Right.
that Dominion, under the law, is able to pass on to all of its ratepayers, uh,
Right.
which
Yeah,
is
good point.
not just the end users that they're building out the system for, but all of us that are on that grid. Uh, we have to pick up the costs, subsidize the cost of expanding the infrastructure to deliver power to these consumers who are going to pay a much more favorable rate than we are. So, it's kind of layer upon layer of issues, and Virginians are starting to see it and feel the pain, and starting to say enough is enough. So I think she was
Yeah.
wise to allude to it generally without getting into too many specifics. It was a victory speech after all, and not a
Yeah.
stuff
Right. Right.
speech. Uh, but I think she has the I read into her comments her own pragmatism in terms of being able to be clear-eyed and seeing what the issues are that matter to Virginians, and having a
Right.
commitment to specifically solving them.
Right. And so, I mean, we can talk. I think it's another podcast to talk about where Democrats need to go from here and what lessons Democrats can learn from Mamdani and his strategy and the way he approached that race. Like I said, New York City is a very different animal than a lot of other places, but what the population of New York is pretty close to that of the entire state of Virginia, right? About the same, maybe a little more.
Right.
So
Yep.
so a lot of people exercise their voice and they voted for, as a general matter, democratic socialism, but they also voted for specific answers to the specific pain points they face in their daily lives, right? The cost and availability of
Yeah.
groceries, the cost and availability of housing, the cost and availability of a way to get to and from their jobs, and whether those jobs are even there,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
I think one thing Democrats need to do is start taking a look uh, at how we can sort of use that or a similar approach in other places in other elections. Um, but just to circle back before we start wrapping up here, the this is a rebuke against Donald Trump and the MAGA agenda, right? And I
Right.
think there's several components to this. It doesn't appear that in the very red places like the 59th and some of the other sort of value pack 27 races, it doesn't really appear that that the needle moved a great deal because of that. Those folks, people in Hanover County, a lot of them have embraced the MAGA agenda. You saw that on the social
Right.
media, the responses from some of those folks on your campaign social media. But a lot of this MAGA agenda is really motivating people to say, I don't like that. And like you said before, if the only way I can demonstrate that or send that message is to vote for a Democrat, I'm going to do that. And so this did work in other areas. Carrie Coyner, the delegate who leaked the Jones texts, lost her race. And that's
Right.
basically an ex-urban district on the southern edges of Richmond, of Richmond City, right? She lost. Obenshain lost way out in the western part of the state. That's the one that I didn't really expect to see flipped, but a woman named Franklin won that race, which I found very interesting. This is a district that's near Roanoke, but doesn't include Roanoke. It's very rural. But I
Uh-huh.
think we can look at a few things. I think first of all, the shutdown, right? Just the shutdown itself was basically Republicans saying we can't govern and we don't want to govern, so we're not even going to try, right? We're okay with the thing just being shut down. And I can tell you what I think about the reasons for that, but that's what they're doing. I think people are really disturbed by the ICE stuff. They're really disturbed when they hear stories about federal agents landing on their apartment buildings in the middle of the night in military helicopters, rappelling down and basically knocking their doors down just because a bunch of brown people live there. And then finally, the Doge thing was especially important in Virginia, where just tens of thousands of Northern Virginians lost their jobs or worried about losing their jobs. And it's not just the government workers; it's the contractors. I used to do a lot of defense contracting.
Right.
I know what it looks like when the government closes and when they just start willy nilly cutting contracts. So, you think that might have gotten some basically conservative folks to shift over at least for this one cycle?
I don't know if the people who shifted were conservatives or if they were moderates. I suspect that uh, they may be more the moderates, and I think Democrats, as long as they campaign against the abuses of power and misgovernance by the Republicans, will have some success. But if you really want to have the kind of mind blowing success like Mamdani, progressives need to be progressive. We like to call ourselves progressive, but we're just as dogmatic as conservatives at times, sticking with our own tried and true dogmas on how we solve problems. And I think uh, Democrats have become risk averse. And I think what freaked
Mm-hmm.
out the Democratic uh, leadership with Mamdani was he wasn't afraid of talking about something new, and he's not
Right,
afraid of failing trying to do it. Uh,
right, right.
so
And
if Democrats really want to pivot and leverage this success from 2025 and 2026, uh, we need to be bolder. We need to live up to our own label of progressive, and throw up, be willing to embrace solutions that are risky. And actually, with all this gerrymandering going on across the country, I think that strategy has got to be foremost in Democratic plans to win a majority in the House, because the Republicans have stacked the deck. It appears successfully across the country, or they're in the process of doing it. And if Democrats always do what they always do, and we just campaign against Trump with the deck restacked against us, we're not going to take back the majority. So we have to do something different. And we need to be a little bit bolder and a little less risk averse. And I think Mamdani and our two new governors and actually even the governor Gavin Newsom in California, by punching back on something that might in the end blow up in his face politically, but he was willing to do it. So
right.
I guess that's my advice to.
Which basically, at the end of the day, I think boils down to the lesson learned from Mamdani, like you just mentioned, and I think it's a great point. It's first of all, be progressive and be sort of unabashedly progressive. This is how I think about things. This is what I think the problems are, and this is what I think the solutions are. And but part of the winning formula there has to be basically calling out the problems and then being at least somewhat specific about the solutions, and then presumably willing to adjust fire, as we used to say, when you try what happens if you implement free public transportation in a city like New York City. What happens when you do that and it doesn't work for one reason or another, right? It costs too much. That's I don't know how that could fail, except that someone besides the riders has to pay for it. Now, presumably, if you do that, more people will take public transportation instead of trying to drive their car in. Maybe not to the center of the city, but to the outskirts of it, which should free up the highways for traffic for people who have to be on the road, like delivery drivers, right, who can't use public transportation. So presumably that could be a win-win, and it could work great. But as we've talked about before, there's always sort of unforeseen issues when you try to implement this stuff, and you have to be ready to adjust your fire and change the way you're doing things. Incremental differences. Right. When you figure out, it's not working like I hoped it would, let's try this, and you have to be willing to do that.
I think you're pointing out exactly sort of the foible of Democrats is we'll let the fear that it doesn't work keep us from even trying, rather than saying, I'm going to try this and I'll make adjustments as we go. We won't even propose it and try it because it's too risky.
Yeah, and that's what Mamdani did, because when he brought that up, a lot of people said, no, you can't do that. That's ridiculous. Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay for it? Well, we'll figure that out, right? But if it improves the quality of life for the regular people who are sweeping the streets and cleaning your offices and manning the emergency rooms, then it's a good thing, and we should be willing to pay for it as a community, right? That's always the big question: is who's going to pay for this? Well, it's a different podcast, but I've got my own ideas about who can pay for it. And we've mentioned his name several times on this podcast.
We know it can work because in Richmond, the buses have been free for the last 5 years. So I don't know where their funding is coming from, but apparently it's sufficient to keep it running.
Yeah. Well, it's a much smaller sort of footprint, but it's possible to do this. You just have to have the funding source, and people have to buy into it as a good idea. And I think in a place like New York City, that's more likely to happen, right? Mm-hmm. So to sort of wrap this up, we're at 34 minutes. To sort of wrap this up, big wins for Democrats yesterday. Results aren't final yet, so we can't really talk specifically about percentages and numbers and all those things. But big wins. Even in the red parts of Virginia, the needle moved a little bit. turnout was very high, which indicates a lot of
Right.
dissatisfaction with what's going on. We've talked a little bit about where that dissatisfaction comes from, and but you have to remember this big sweep in the House of Delegates, 64 to 36, close to a supermajority. That's close to 2/3. But the Senate in Virginia is still pretty close to 50-50. Democrats control it, but this does not mean that the the that the legislature would be able to override a veto if Winsome Earl Sears had won, right? So
Right. Right.
it
Well,
matters
Abigail
who
has a
controls these offices.
right.
Go ahead.
You don't need a supermajority to have a governing majority, and I think
Right,
the citizens of Virginia have given Abigail a governing majority, and with the lieutenant governor being a Democrat, the tie-breaking vote is there in
right,
the Senate. And when you have a governing majority, you don't have to worry about vetoes uh,
right, right,
because you're
and
all on the same page and you're moving together. So
right, and
I think the prospects in the future is very bright for Virginia. Uh, I think we're going to
well,
see a lot more liberal legislation. I think we're going to get those constitutional amendments before the voters and let the voters
mhm.
decide, which is the way we should always do things. So prospects are really favorable for the Commonwealth.
Yeah, I think the way I read Abigail Spanberger, and I know Zala Hashmi a little better. Hashmi, Lieutenant Governor elect Hashmi, she's an educator. I've spoken with her pretty extensively, at least a couple of years ago, and I think she and Spanberger are both the kinds of progressives who feel a lot about these things the same way I do, and that is that they see change coming, they see social change coming, but they want to be pragmatic about managing it so it doesn't disrupt lives any more than necessary, right? So they understand that young people think differently about things than people our age or people Abigail's age, and they want to embrace that and sort of help make their lives better and give them those opportunities that we had as boomers, right? And then
Right.
The Jones win was huge because Jones will join lawsuits against the MAGA agenda. He will sort of fight. He'll give us the kind of AG opinions that will help that governing majority you just talked about actually govern.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think Virginia is in excellent shape. I think New Jersey is in excellent shape. New York City will be an interesting experiment to watch. And one final note, and that is that once the election results are final, I think it'll be very interesting to take a closer look, sort of a deeper dive into the data to see if we can come to any conclusions about just who voted, whether it was
Right.
this a sudden upsurge of people who don't pay attention and they suddenly started voting? Did they move the needle on basically getting some moderate Republicans to abandon the MAGA agenda at least for one cycle, or was this just reflective of some kind of demographic change? You know, younger people moving to Virginia, or is the only thing that happened a bunch of federal workers in the Commonwealth suddenly decided to vote because they're worried about losing their jobs or already lost it? I mean, and the only way to know that is to start looking at the data very carefully, right? So, final
So
thoughts, Scott?
my yeah, my theory
Or
is Abigail was a better candidate than Terry McAuliffe. Uh,
right?
and
Well,
we talk
that's
about these
yeah,
structural changes, these externalities, uh, demographic shifts, and issues of the day. But we often forget the caliber of the candidate and their ability to craft and deliver messages that resonate, and their ability to lead. And and I think we're very lucky that uh, we have Abigail who's riding the ship from 2021.
yes. Well, and Spamberger, I think she checks a lot of boxes that will boost turnout on the progressive side. But besides being a woman, and now the first woman elected governor in the Commonwealth, in the history of the Commonwealth, first woman to hold that seat. She has the CIA and sort of national security background, which helps in Virginia since so many people living here work in that sort of space, that segment of the economy. And I think you and I talked about this in Ashland, that when we saw her there, that she went to places where McAuliffe didn't go. She understood that she couldn't win just by boosting turnout in Northern Virginia. She needed to get another 2 or 3% out of Hanover County, right? And that's why she came to Ashland and had you introduce her, right? To try to boost that the turnout there and try to get Dems to come out in these red areas. McAuliffe did not do that, and I think that was a key thing. I think that's true on the flip side, though. I'm not sure that Sears was the best candidate the Republicans could have put up. And I actually heard some people say that last night, that they thought that Sears was kind of a throwaway, that they didn't think they could beat Spanberger, so they put Sears out there as kind of a sacrificial lamb, as it were. I don't know about that. I don't. I've gone to a lot of Republican committee meetings, a lot of Republican sort of Tea Party meetings, and other meetings where conservatives gather and talk. That's not the way they think about that, at least not at the grassroots level.
Yeah.
So
Monday
I just
morning
don't buy. I just don't buy.
I think they can give themselves credit for it now in retrospect, but claim that it was the plan, but it never was the plan.
Well, and I don't think that's not to say I think Sears was the best candidate that they could offer, because I don't think she was. But I think that's not because they didn't think they could win. I think that's because she won the primary, because she's that extreme, and the extreme voters on the conservative side choose their nominee. But she couldn't articulate a vision for where she wanted to take the Commonwealth. She couldn't do that. This is the problem. It's high electricity bills. What am I going to do about it? I'm going to make high users pay their fair share. All she could talk about was boys and girls bathrooms.
Boys in the girls' room.
Which, for 99% of Virginians, that's not something they see in their daily lives as a problem, right? There might be 1,000 people whose kids went to one school in Loudoun County or something, I don't know, who actually think that's a real big problem, but it's not something that happens everywhere. And so most people don't experience that in their daily lives. It's not part of their lived experience, right? So, anyway, well, I guess if you'd like to find out more about Scott, and Scott, I don't know what your plans are. We could talk about that on a future podcast. I know when I ran for office the next day, I was kind of going back and forth about what I wanted to do next. And I know a lot of folks are going to ask you if you plan to run again, because you're a great candidate, very thoughtful, empathetic, and intelligent. And I think you'd be a great delegate or senator or board of supervisors member, whatever. But I understand that it takes time to sort of sort that out, talk to the family and those kinds of things. So I won't ask you that now. But folks, one more time, we'll plug Scott's website. It's www.scottka4va.com. And Scott, I suspect over the rest of the week, you'll put a message up there thanking the supporters, that's saying, hey, thanks for all the donations. Thanks for showing up to vote for me. Really appreciate all your support. And then you can find us, the two of us, at www.foggybottomline.com. And we're on Insta and TikTok at Foggy Bottom Line, and on YouTube at Foggy Bottom Line Media. The podcast is also on Spotify. So you can support the podcast through Venmo, Foggy Bottom Line, at Foggy Bottom Line, if you use Venmo. And we're looking for some other sort of pathways to support the podcast going down the road. Now that the election's over, I think, Scott, we can shift focus a little bit and maybe get into the economics and other silly things a little more than the politics.
Yeah, yeah. That
But
you give two soldiers a microphone, you never know what we'll talk about.
you just never know, right? It's we
You
just
just
hope it's
never know.
entertaining. If it's not, let us know. If it is, let us know. Encourage us to keep doing this. I've got no plans to stop, Scott. I don't think you've told me you don't either.
Well, I'm in. Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, we're all into we're here to try to help people understand what's going on around us, uh, politically, economically, other silly thingsy. We're here to try to uh, clarify some things, try to speak our truths, and try to sort of uh, explain the way these two old soldiers look at the world, right? And that can be funny sometimes. It can be silly sometimes. It can be hard to hear sometimes. We're going to try to pop your epistemic bubble, whichever one you're in, whether it's progressive, liberal, conservative, MAGA. We're going to try to pop that epistemic bubble. So keep listening, keep watching. Let us know what you think. Subscribe, comment, share. Talk us up, talk us down if that's how you feel. We got a lot of negatives on TikTok. I don't know why, but
Yeah,
TikTok is where the trolls are living
yeah.
for
Hey,
Foggy Bottom Line. But
I developed some pretty thick skin the last few weeks.
well, if you spend a significant amount of time as an Army NCO or Army officer, you're going to have a thick skin, right? Because the bullets kind of have to bounce
Right.
off of you because there's going to be some.
Right.
But we'll keep trying to draw fire, right? So
Yep.
so. All right. Well, take care, sir. Have a good one. Congratulations on an excellent campaign. Really appreciate you doing
Thank
that.
you.
Guys, great results for Democrats. If you're a Democrat, you have to be very pleased today that we have, like you said, Scott, righted the ship. We're on a better pathway now. And now we just have to sort of expand this vibe out so it's national because now we've got elections next year for Congress. And I think we won't get away from politics at all, completely, because we'll be talking about Rob Whitman and CD1 and what that primary will look like here over the next few months, right? So,
Right.
all right, take care of yourself, Scott. Enjoy.
Okay.
One last chance for a final word if you have one.
No, I'm worded out today. I'm kind of tired.
Word it
Been
out.
used up a lot of words the last few weeks, so we'll save the ones
Yeah,
I have left
that
for
you
next week.
have. That you have. We'll save it for next week. All right. Take care, everybody. Great seeing you again. We will be back next week and look for some short videos in between. Scott, take care of yourself and have a good afternoon.
Carry on. Thank you.
Carry on,
Bye bye.
guys. Peace. Out here.